Hello guys, and this is huge because Russia cannot stop the gasoline crisis and it's only getting worse and worse. Actually, lots of their businessmen report this is something they have never experienced even in the 90s, straight after the collapse of the USSR. At the beginning, it was only about prices. They kept rising. Actually, before the start of Blitzkrieg, gas was way cheaper. And right now, the prices are 50% higher. That is half of a price. That's a lot. But the shortages are getting more and more serious. And whole chains of gas stations like Lukoil, Tatneft, report that they need to close lots of their gas stations, even in Moscow, because they don't have fuel to sell. And top popular kinds like AI92, AI95 disappear from gas stations. People do not understand what is happening, or at least they pretend they don't. The local authorities describe it as problems with logistics, pending deliveries, but those who live close to the Russian oil refineries, those who have access to internet, clearly understand that the Ukrainian drone sanctions are to thank for this defuelization, degasification of Russia. And this also influenced a lot of spheres of the Russian life, including dropped sales of cars, 30-20%, depending on whether these are passenger cars or trucks. But all of that happens in the context of constant drone attacks. Russia is a no-fly zone, and a lot of deliveries, logistics now depend on trucks that don't have enough fuel to run the Russian roads. This is a disaster, and believe me, such a big country as the Russian Federation can easily be defeated if you choose a smart strategy. And ours is to paralyze their war machine by destroying oil refining industry, which is the money and blood of the Russian Federation. So let's discuss how this gasoline crisis develops and what are the most important consequences that we actually see right now on the Russian roads, in the Russian gas stations, and in the comments that dissatisfied Russians leave online. My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and if you want to see the defeat and demilitarization of Russia, subscribe and share these videos to spread the truth. So, Russia suspended the sales of many kinds of gasoline that is popular. We're not talking about something luxurious, something rare. We are talking about petrol like A92, A95, which disappeared from lots of Russian regions, and it is also absent from many Russian gas stations in Moscow. Putin always protected the capital from any problems, from conscription, from economic disasters, from lack of something. But now it's pretty obvious the airspace is not under the control of the Kremlin, but under the control of Ukrainian drones, and the same applies to their gas stations. So literally, famous chains of Russian gas stations like Lukoil, actually on the brink of the bankruptcy because of Putin's economic mismanagement. Tatneft, report that they have to close their gas stations because they literally have nothing to sell. This is in Moscow. This happens in the south of Russia, in the Far East. That's the reality, not just from the frontline regions or the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Literally, there is no gas in Crimea. And you can find videos of people driving beautiful, scenic roads of the peninsula and filming really long queues. More than 50% of gas stations in Crimea do not have gas to sell. And in general, for example, in the south of Russia, the shortage reaches 14%. That is a lot, and we're talking about days and weeks that all of this develops. And for example, a lot of businessmen, especially people involved in gas station business that was always very profitable in Russia, report that they have never experienced this kind of crisis, even in 1990s. And trust me, I was born in 1984. 1990s is my childhood, and I do remember what poor years these were. People didn't have a lot of cars. Now they have, but they actually stopped buying them, and sales keep dropping, which brings us to another very important conclusion. Fuel influences so many spheres of the Russian economic and business life that they could not predict previously. Subscribe to witness the dissolution of the Russian Federation, and subscribe to know how to act, to be safe, to be smart, and to be kind, because that's also very important. So the production of cars, the sales of cars drop seriously. For example, passenger cars in August, minus 27.4%. That's a lot, 27. It's not 1.7, it's 27.4. And when talking about trucks, it's 37%. They dropped the production and sales of truck cars inside Russia, which leads to the bankruptcy of Avtovaz, which already switched to a 4-day working week. And somehow news in your countries do not report about that. But I'm happy that Zelensky had some time with Trump, and perhaps special services, some advisors, not only Ukrainians, made him hear the truth about the Russian economic state. And as a businessman, we're not going to discuss what kind of businessman, he can sense that Russia is not just a paper tiger, it's a used toilet paper tiger. So why buy cars if there is no gasoline? And Russians, they experienced a very traumatized life in the communist country. They like it because there are different people, but they remember these cues, and they start acting as they did in these years before the collapse of the USSR, and these were hungry years, angry years, miserable years. And there are reports of them stealing gasoline from each other's cars during night. Just imagine you send your family to sleep and you go out hunting, stealing petrol from your neighbors. Disgusting, right? And there are also reports that on Telegram channel, I saw that I never invite you to chats. Remember, these are scammers. Plus, Telegram is a rubbish bin, but as a person that collects information from the fields, I do have to spend some time there. They now have maps of gasoline, like we have air raid alerts maps that shows the danger. They have maps inside Russian regions where you can find some gasoline, and people travel to that gas stations. It's very likely that till you reach it, there will be none left, because those who have access, those who have connections, and here we return back to the eternal Russian tradition of corruption, buy tons of gasoline where they can have access to it. So they buy tons to sell it later to those who are in need at the very high prices. And here we come to another problem that Russians do not know how to solve. Russia is a no-fly zone. It's not something you cannot check. You can see that dozens of Russian regions are a war zone now. They are lucky we only target legitimate facilities, arsenals, military production sites, drone plants, Iskander missile systems, but we travel via their airspace that they don't know how to protect. And because of that, they cancel flights in Moscow 2 days in a row, in St. Petersburg, in many more, literally dozens of Russian regions, not just those bordering with Ukraine, even Bashkortostan, even Astrakhan, and these are 1,000 kilometers away from Ukrainian border. And because of drones in their airspace, they cannot fly. And also because of sanctions, because of inability to maintain cargo planes, they have serious problems with logistics, with transportation, with delivery of goods. And they relied on trucks. And now they cannot send these trucks to the locations they need, or because they don't have fuel for these trucks. And Russia boasts that it's the largest country in the world. Actually, not Russia, but the Russian Federation, that has a great potential, of the dissolution, or because lots of East countries are very different from the Ruski Mir doctrine. They were captured. They did not manage to free themselves during this opportunity window in the 90s. I'm sure this may happen to them in the future. And for the Kremlin, it was super important to have connection with these regions, to have influence on these regions, and of course to have transportation between Russia and the republics of the Russian Federation. And it seems like soon they won't be able to afford it. So not just the prices for gasoline rose 50% since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and since the day Putin started the destruction of the Russian Federation, let's be honest. But now, even for these prices, they cannot find gasoline in lots of Russian regions and on many gas stations in the capital of Russia. You can see many kilometer-long queues. I actually think to discuss this topic a little bit more on Anna Danilchuk channel. And to be able to see that, remember to subscribe and watch some conversational videos that appeared on the channel before. For example, where I talk about my Soviet childhood. Because that Soviet childhood was marked by shortages, rising prices, but what is worse, inability to get something that you really need. So you were prepared to pay double, triple price, but you could not find it. Exactly what Russians do now, looking at those map of gas stations, trying to find gasoline in a country that was always described as a mafia gas station. Russia can and will be defeated. This process has already started. And to witness it together, to understand how it happens, to safeguard yourself when this monster will dissolve, subscribe and share these videos with your loved ones, with those people for whom you care. Because so many good people still live in this fog of the Moscow-centered vision of Eastern Europe. It's very wrong. The Russian Empire dissolved twice in the 20th century, as the empire itself, then as the USSR, and now we are watching the final third collapse that will lead to birth of many new normal nations, and we have to be prepared. Follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Discord, all the links in the description of this video, together with the link to our merch shop, where we've got lots of good t-shirts, caps, cups, pillowcases, hoodies and sweatshorts, because actually they are sweatshirts because we are heading into autumn, at least here in Ukraine. Let me know what's the weather like in your parts of the world. I love reading more about the places you are supporting Ukraine from and where I actually have friends in. And thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel, but most importantly, thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!